Hello, and welcome to an extra special broadcast. This is Cotter out on the back porch, recording a video that I just kind of thought I should record. It's about when things don't go according to plan, because I find often when you're working with God, who's the creator of the universe and knows a lot more than you do, there come a lot of situations where things don't go exactly how you thought they would. And I think this can often be very discouraging. We can often look at this and say, what's going on? Am I doing something wrong, Lord? Are you not, why aren't you doing what I thought you would? And it can be really discouraging, just experiencing that. It's tough. And so I just thought I'd record a video about it, just my thoughts about this topic, because I think it's a topic that everyone has to address at some point in their lives. And for me, it's been very present. I'm not going to go into incredible detail about things, but there have been some areas of my life where I've really prayed that things would happen in a certain way, even, and they didn't. I I set things up, I planned it ahead of time, and then I went there, and my plan was it just didn't work. And I think the very natural reaction in these situations is to look at it and say, God, what did what did I do wrong? Did I make a mistake? Is this not your plan? And and that's one response. And the other response that I know is quite common is, Lord, what are you doing? What's up? What are you I thought this was your plan. Did something change? And both of these responses, they're valid. They're responses that are very human, I think, to have and reflect the nature of who we are as humans, the fact that we ascribe to God certain characteristics which we think naturally belong to him, but may not be exactly accurate. And I think I'll start by addressing that question of, Lord, did you make a mistake? Because I think I've had this thought, even if I've not wanted to admit it, I've had this thought sometimes. God, did you make a mistake here? Did something go wrong? And I just want to say, I understand this perspective, but God never makes any mistakes. Everything always happens according to what he has in mind. I think the issue here is that we often expect that God will work in the same ways that we do. We create our plans, and our plans are very human plans, and we think that things will happen according to our plans, and we naturally assume that our plans reflect in some way God's plans. But the truth is, this isn't true at all. There's a specific verse, I don't know the reference, unfortunately. Maybe I can insert it back in here. But the verse says, his ways are not our ways. God's ways are not our ways. His plans are not our plans. The things that we think are God's plans are not God's plans. Now, it may be possible that some aspect of what we think is his plan does happen to be a part of his plan. But even in that instance, we don't see the full picture. We see a small segment of an overall picture. Like, say, okay, I'm like, all right, I really want to go to this concert because I've really wanted to see this person. And, a lot of my friends are going, and it'll be a great chance to bond with them and, of course, just have a fun time. And I'm like, all right, God, I don't know if I can fit this in, but I'm having trust that you will help me fit it in. And I go and I make the plans, and it's looking all good. And then I get there and something comes up and I have to quit, or maybe all my friends inexplicably cancel for their own specific reasons, or maybe the whole concert gets canceled. And you look at that and you say, what what was wrong with that concert? Couldn't I just go and enjoy a concert? What's wrong? And we we almost have this sense of anger we develop towards God in our response to him. it's hard to understand, but God's purpose is so above us that we our perception of what is good, what is right, what should happen is not at all what God thinks should happen. And if it lines up, it's basically coincidence. We can, in some small part, maybe understand what he is doing, but it's so difficult to grasp even a fraction of the overall picture that even trying is almost futile, basically. So in the concert example, we'd look at that and say, "Oh, what a terrible thing. Why wouldn't God let us go?" But then maybe we find out maybe it was because one of your friends needed some extra time with his mom, and another one maybe needed to catch up on some of those chores he was putting off, and maybe you yourself have been overworking yourself and you need to take a break and just rest and stop putting so much stock in what happens in the future and start focusing more on the present, or spend more time to reflect. There are so many small things that God does. God understands what we need so much more than we do. And for us to, once again, for us to try and understand that is so tough. We think we understand ourselves. We think we understand what we need, but God understands us so much more than we ever could. So when something goes wrong with our plans and we look at God and say, "What, did you make a mistake?" No, God never makes any mistakes. We make mistakes. We mistakenly believe that we understand God's plan, but God himself never makes any mistakes. He understands perfectly what will happen, and he has a plan for us that goes beyond any small little plans we make up for ourselves. Now, I mentioned that the first response is to look at God and ask what happened, but the other response is to look inward at ourselves and say, did I do something wrong? Was I foolish? Was I ignorant? Did I have hubris? Did I put too much stock in my own ability to plan out my life? And these are all natural responses. I've had them plenty of times, trust me. And they're responses that come from a good place. They come from a place of humility. They come from a place where you understand that your ways are not his ways, and oftentimes your plans don't line up with what he has in store. But I think the mistake we make here is that we assume that if we plan something and it doesn't go according to our plan, that we've done something wrong. I know I've made this mistake many times. I would rather not go into detail, but there was something I was trying to make happen, and I kept on trying to set it up so that it would happen and I'd finally get what I wanted, and it failed every single time. And finally I said I'd give it one final attempt, and I put it in God's hands, and I said, if you'll allow it to happen, that's great. If you won't, that's also fine. And he answered, and he closed the door. And when that happened, my temptation was to look back at what had happened in my life, all those attempts I'd made to make something happen, and think that I was doing something wrong. And maybe to some extent I was. Maybe God was giving me signs and I wasn't picking them up. But God also understands that we're really stupid sometimes, and we can't always understand everything that's happening. God doesn't give us all the information, not because he's cruel or he somehow doesn't want us to be happy, or he's closing things off from us. I believe that God often hides things from us just simply because we could not understand the whole picture if he tried to show it to us. We have such a narrow perspective on life, and we are so easily enraptured in that perspective that we forget that God's perspective is millions, billions of times broader than ours. He sees not just all that is happening now, but all that will happen and all that has happened. Think about that for a second. Process that. God understands so much more about the way the world works, the way we work, the way that everything interacts together, that for us to even try to process it is futile. Which isn't to say we shouldn't try to some extent. We should try to have an understanding that God is wise, God knows us, God knows everything, and we can trust him. And so when things don't go according to our plan, we shouldn't look at that and think that we did something wrong. We should understand that God knows that we're not going to understand him, and he works around our own failures. And so, what is the proper response when our plans don't work out? What do we say to God's answer of no to our prayers? Well, the proper response is surrender, to understand that God knows more than we do, and to surrender our self will to Him, to His will, and to reinforce our love for Him, to tell Him, Lord, I love you, I trust you, thy will be done. So, the reason I'm recording this now is because I was supposed to have something happen today. I was planning on this thing, I was excited for this thing, I was thinking it would be quite cool, but it didn't work out. And it sucks. It does suck. You know, I'm not going to say that I'm unfazed. I was hoping this would happen. But the fact that it didn't happen isn't going to change my relationship with God, because my relationship with God is built on trust. I trust God. I know that His will is greater than my own. And so, I'm fine. I might be a little sad tonight, but I'm fine. I'm okay. And you'll be okay too. Another mistake we often make is we get trapped in this pain of the moment. We look at our present circumstances and we say, man, this really sucks. How could this have happened? We get really sad. We get really frustrated, angry. And it's fine to experience emotions. It's fine to be sad when something you hoped happened didn't happen. But the best response we can have is to take all that emotion, give it to the Lord, and once again, surrender. Let Him know that you trust Him. Let Him know that it's all right. Let Him know that your relationship in Him doesn't depend on whether He meets your expectations, unless those expectations are that He holds according to His character. And let Him know that you will be with Him forever. Through thick and thin, if every plan of yours fails, you'll be with Him. If every plan of yours works out, you'll still be with Him. Just don't allow these things to tear down your relationship with God, because in the end, the most important thing about our existence here is our relationship with God. So don't allow your own emotions, your own frustrations, your own plans to get in the way of your relationship with God. God is everything. Thank you guys. Thank you for listening. I thought this was kind of fun. I enjoy recording like this. I just came up with this completely mobile setup where I just plug one USB into my laptop and everything's quite set up well. And I also installed some noise suppression, which I think works pretty well. Hopefully the audio on this is good. If not, that's fine, you know. Yeah. Thank you for listening, and have a good night.